Well, then Tallulah, that kind of raises the question whether we are playing games or working with a coach or whatever else. What ideas would you suggest to people who are watching tonight that want to, I guess, maybe take a little bit more ownership of the way that they present or their persona and their voice in these ways?
So the first thing is to make sure that you have a healthy voice, that you're taking care of it. Um, and then I'd start thinking about what you want for your voice. Start being aware of where your voice is now. There's a lot of free resources on the internet. If those are complicated or not working, you need a little external motivation. There's voice coaches. Finding someone who can change their own voice gender presentation is super helpful for that process. I think that community is incredibly important. Reaching out and finding people who are able to have a shared experience and be supportive is really important. So I think all of that, just finding community, having a healthy voice. I do have just like a sort of, if your voice is strained, then take a break. But in general, right, if we aren't having pain or strain, our voice likes to be used. So we can always do humming and different small sounds where our mouth is small, or ahs with a straw, ah with the straws in our mouth, different things to make our voice be happy because our voice wants to be used. Yeah, and not whispering when we're sick, just either not use our voice or use it at full volume. That also helps.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but are there any exercises or tips or tricks or even just silly games that you'd like to recommend to us here? I mean, working with a straw or anything else that might come to mind?
So I have something that I think would be helpful for everyone, whether or not they're working on their voice gender presentation. So especially when we're anxious, we have a tendency to make our voice constrict. So there's our true vocal folds that vibrate, and then on top of them there are false vocal folds that only really vibrate in throat singing, which is not something I can do. But we can make a sound, ah, find the point where that sound is made from. It's about the middle. And then we can silently go back and forth between pretending to grunt and preparing to laugh. So, and we'll feel a movement happen right above our finger. And that's our false vocal folds, opening and closing. And if we go into that position that we're about to laugh and keep that open feeling, then if we yell, we're not going to hurt our voice because we're not pushing air past our false vocal folds. Our voice sounds clean and clear. We don't necessarily sound so anxious if our voice is open. And, like royalty has a tendency to always have their false vocal folds retracted as a sort of voice recipe that it tends to get used. If we want to check whether or not our false vocal folds are retracted, we can try to make an H sound. If we breathe and we hear our breath, our false vocal folds are in the way, but we can breathe at the same rate in and out and not hear our breath. And that means they're parted, retracted. And if we can make an H sound, they're not retracted, they're in the way. So that's a test for whether or not we've retracted them. But just retracting your false vocal folds out of the way lets you have a clean, clear voice. If you're a teacher, you're having to use your voice a lot, a speech language pathologist, having to yell at students, like all of that, just being able to not have them in the way helps a lot with vocal health.
Yeah, I honestly feel like I'm gonna need to go back and watch that part of the video. To get a sense of how to actually go through the motions as you were describing them, but then also, and again for the podcast audience who may want to check this out, to just see your face expressions as you go through fake grunting and fake laughing is just remarkable. I cannot stop geeking out at just how amazing our ability to communicate is. As human beings, as great apes, as mammals, we have this remarkable ability to communicate and to coordinate and to express emotions and information back and forth. It's why we're the dominant species on this planet, but it's also just incredible the way that we have evolved these incredibly sophisticated and unique and diverse bodies, and to recognize in myself like a sincere lack of ability to really like manipulate and utilize these tools. It's just amazing seeing a professional like yourself who's able to navigate and utilize their bodies in ways that are honestly really foreign.
You can learn. Everyone can learn.
Mm-hmm.
I do, if people are going to listen back, I do just want to model the 3 different positions, right? So my false vocal folds are really constricted. I sound like I'm lifting a heavy box or I'm pooping. This is the voice that we make when we're constricted. In a mid position, which is how I normally talk, there's a little bit of an edge there. You can kind of hear that it's not a totally smooth tube the sound is passing through. Or I can be in a retracted position where my vocal folds moved out of the way and it's a smooth path. I just wanted to show that so we know what we're talking about. But there's so many exercises like that and different pieces and parts, and you should learn because we all can. And playing with our voices is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no question. Do you have any recommendations for just kind of daily life? For when you want to like sit down and practice, that's one thing. But is there anything in particular that you might recommend for folks who are wanting to be more mindful and more intentional in sort of their day-to-day speech and conversation?
So I do a vocal warm up myself, and I find that my clients who do them as well tend to be able to get started with their preferred voice recipe more easily. A really easy way to do a vocal warm up is to do some like, oh, whoa, and then small sounds, sounds where the sound is flowing and your mouth has a little opening, zzz, ing, like walking, ing, and then the middle sound and measure, zh, and going through a few rounds of those in the morning, right? Our voices want to be used, and then your voice will be ready for the day and happy to be working for you and sounding good and clear.
So is it important then to warm our voices up in the morning or to start the day off in any particular way? Do you have any thoughts or tips on how to not just, I guess, avoid damaging our voice, but to like stretch it out and to work it out and to put it to work?
I mean, we're literally talking about muscles here, right? I think hydration is also super important. That should not be left out for sure. But yeah, I do think highly approve. I do think that that using a vocal warm up in the morning before we get started is really good. And also just being aware if we feel like there's a very significant difference between how our voice sounds when we get out of bed and how it does half an hour later, then we should really take a look at how our throat feels. And if there's any discomfort, talk to our doctor about it, because we might have something going on, like having acid come up in the middle of the night and irritating our vocal folds. But yeah, vocal health is very important. If we want our voice to work for us, we have to help it along. But vocal warm-ups are super good. And you can also do a vocal warm-up after you've used your voice. People will come in and say, oh, I had a really hard voice day. And we do those same exercises I just modeled a minute ago, maybe a little bit more times, but the same thing. And then they'll say that their voice is feeling better. I can show you a straw one. This is a really good restorative one. But if we have an ah, just up with the straw in our mouth. Or down. We're using our vocal folds and it makes them happy. A few of those will make our voice feel better. Our voice wants to be used.
Use it or lose it. I actually really like that idea because I do find, at least as an outsider, that is maybe a very pervasive myth that you need to not just rest your voice, but maybe like avoid using it, and that there's almost this idea that if you use it too much, you might break it or whatever else. And folks who have been listening to this show when Dr. Ray is on will definitely recognize the idea that any of your muscles that you want to use should probably be used, that you're not going to run out of orgasms or anything else, that these muscles are part of your body and that they're meant to be exercised.
Yeah, side note into speech therapy, but something that happened a lot when I was in the nursing homes is that there would be very active elderly adults, 80s, 90s year old, living independently, and then they would fall and break their hip. And when you have a hip fracture, you have to stay in bed for 3 weeks, and their muscles would get so weak during those 3 weeks that they had been able to clear their lungs of anything that went down the wrong way. They had dysphagia, a swallowing problem before, but then when they're in bed, they're no longer having the strength, and they end up getting pneumonia from this dysphagia they never knew they had because they were always up and breathing deeply, which clears our lungs and makes them happy. And so, yeah, I totally like the idea of use your muscles.
Bodies are weird. Well, you've mentioned some of these different communities and things. Are there any other resources that folks watching should go and check out? Any podcasts or websites, YouTube videos, or anything else that you would like to shout out or recommend to folks?
I do. I just started adding videos to my YouTube channel, and I will continue putting up more. I have some talks about gender voice I've put up there. The Facebook community is free. I have two. I have one that is for people who want to change their own voice gender presentation, and then I have another that's for people who are helping others. Gender voice is an extremely fast moving field, and you can't really check out and stay up to date on the techniques. We just aren't established with what the best way to do it is yet. So it's a free space. We have meetings every other Thursday for SLPs and voice coaches to come to learn skills, because right, like if it's hard to work on your voice as it is, we should all be doing it as effectively and efficiently as we can, whether we're doing it ourselves or for others. I have a blog, and I have an extremely detailed resource list on the blog that is Texas centric, but it's any sort of resource that would be relevant to people who are gender diverse is on there. There's it's long, but I do keep that up to date as well.
Okay, well, great, and we definitely have links to that sort of thing in the show notes for the episode.